Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our online Zoom service for this, the first Sunday of June. We, as a prelude, just listened, or maybe didn't hear, Kelly Clarkson challenging us in her new song, To Dare to Love. And this morning, I have a very special service lined up for us. I want to start with a statement from the New Thought movement from Dr. David Alexander. It says, the New Thought movement should not miss the moment that is before it. For a spiritual theology that dares to proclaim a radically inclusive spiritual equality must stand up and speak up in a nation and world where basic human rights are denied any of its people. Failure to do so is spiritual malfeasance and theologically bankrupt behavior that fails to live up to the principle of oneness it claims to promote. So a very clear statement there for all of us about the need for new thought to step up during these times. And today our theme again is taking a look at our mindfulness, at our consciousness. Be mindful of your self-talk. It's a conversation with the universe. So everything that we're thinking and all that we're feeling, we are sending energy out to the universe, and of course it gets reflected out there. As always, we start our service by lighting our Christ candle. And Claire, can you give me a thumbs up if you hear me okay? Yeah, great. So this morning we light our candle for peace. We light it for justice. We light it for all those who have died recently through acts of violence, perpetuated by, in some cases, the government or those who are acting on our behalf. And so we go to that place of love in our own hearts. And we send healing love to all those who have been impacted so harshly by the violence and by the injustice, not just of the last 2 weeks, but of lifetimes, of years of not being treated equally, not being treated the way we as white people are treated. So we let the love from our hearts pour out into that field of injustice and of inequality. We pour out that love into the hearts of all government leaders, of all those in the police forces, in local positions of power, that all our hearts may be softened and changed. So the song that I'm about to play was recorded 2 years ago. We actually played it a couple of times at Unity, and sad to say that it's become more relevant today. It's our opening song, We Shall Overcome, by Daniel Nemad and Nemo Patel.
It's burning inside, the hurting and the suffering. Minds creating anger, fear and pain, suffocating our times. The tougher it gets, the rougher social media cries. But we see to it that we tweeting only negative lines. We're sick and tired of history, but repeating it twice. Greed, anger and violence, clearly stealing our nights. Feeling it tight between the shoulders with a chill in the spine. Pinching myself, waking up, trying to stop the rewind and move forward towards stories, overcoming our fears. Choosing love over hate, praying, trading hugs over tears. There's only one choice, breaking down the walls and repair every broken heart on this planet till there's no longer fear.
Walls can't hold us in. Fear can't keep us down. Love will rise again. Yeah, it's rising right now. We shall overcome.
Every time I think it's gonna take much longer,
We shall overcome.
every time I question, am I getting stronger?
We have just begun.
Wanna make a change, we gotta push much farther.
We shall overcome.
We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. Young Gandhi couldn't fathom how to deal with himself when he was thrown off the train and the pain that he felt. Mrs. Parks disrespected, dragged into jail because of the color of her skin, organs, tissues, and cells. One day, a young girl was shot on a bus by a man, a terrorist, part of the Taliban. He said, "On this land, you have no right to stand for what you believe in. Girls have no chance here." Well, now, that's just the story of three souls who shook our planet after being down on their knees. And it's not gonna stop. Those seeds have now become trees, and as human beings, we'll keep on digging till we find peace.
Yeah, the cynics always say that nothing ever changes. The human nature's bound to stay the same. But it couldn't be more plain that violence never pays, injustice never stays. It's bound to fade away. What if history awaits? What if today's the day? We already know the way, so let's all lead the way. We shall overcome.
Every time I think it's gonna take much longer,
We shall overcome.
every time I question, am I getting stronger?
We have just begun.
Gotta make a change, we gotta push much farther.
We shall overcome.
We shall overcome. Come on now.
I will carry on. I will carry on. I will carry on. I will carry on. After we're gone, we're on to the tree we planted. We'll be strong.
Yeah, come on. Yep. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe that we shall overcome someday.
Makes me wanna sing now. We shall overcome.
Every time I think it's gonna take much longer,
We shall overcome.
every time I question, am I getting stronger?
We shall overcome.
change, we gotta push much farther.
Someday.
'Cause I'm feeling it deep in my heart.
Deep in my heart,
I do believe.
I do believe.
I do believe.
We shall overcome someday.
Come on, put your hearts together. Here we go. Woo. I knew it. God had a plan for us to do it. To hit rock bottom before we rise and continue. To first learn greed before we learn to be human. To do wrong deeds before we learn to spread beauty. There's always a plan, and now it's time to take a stand for the right of the planet, every woman and man. We ain't gonna stop, only growing our demands for all beings to feel peace in every heart and land. Thank you, Lord, for the strength and the courage to bring us together and keep our souls nourished. These tough times will only drown in our chorus, because we all believe that the truth is before us. We shall overcome this pain. We shall overcome this day. We pray for love to lead the way.
We shall overcome.
was powerful then, and it's powerful now. So I'm wearing my Roman collar and my Unity shirt today because today is the 33rd anniversary, or this weekend. Yesterday was the 33rd anniversary of my being ordained Catholic priest in my home church in Ireland, and today is my anniversary of my first Mass. And I think that the last few weeks and months have probably been the most important weeks in all of those years of ministry, and especially the last few weeks as well. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about what I want to say today. I want my message to you to be inspiring. I want it to be comforting. I want it to be supportive at this time. But I also want it to be challenging. And it isn't easy to strike the right balance between all four emphases, but it's important that I attempt to do so. What we are experiencing is a moral and spiritual test as to how to create a beloved community here on earth. It would be morally and spiritually irresponsible of me to not respond to the state of things currently in our country, and not to try to give us some guidance. And the question before us today is, how do we respond as spiritual human beings to the issues of injustice and racism in our society? It's easy to respond just as a divine being. Or maybe it's easy to respond just as a human being. But it's the mix of both that is our challenge. The cause of injustice and racism is human unconsciousness, not being fully present, being lost in separation thinking and in fearful emotion. And if we're not careful, witnessing injustice and racism can drag us into a place of powerlessness and reactivity. Perhaps you've been there already over the last 2 weeks. Become too involved in an unconscious way, and we become part of the problem. We need to be really awake and aware at this time. We need to respond from a place of real power. We mustn't get caught up in the story, because that's the place of unconsciousness. Racism is a sickness of the soul, and therefore the cure for it is also to be found in our souls. And we need to remember that there is a peace beyond understanding, beyond the rational mind, that is to be found in the intelligence and intuition of the soul. That is the place of power from which we need to respond. Today, I want to talk about three important things: racial awareness, racial literacy, and the need for each one of us to take personal action of some sort in response to current events. We cannot sit this out, and we cannot be silent. We're looking for soulful, conscious, awake, and aware ways to respond. The first, racial awareness, requires that we become aware of what it means to be part of a dominant culture, particularly white European culture, which has its own values, and society runs on those values, and we need to look at them. It requires being aware that any dominant culture always has unearned and often unrecognized advantages. It means being aware that all other cultures and races are seen as second class. Racial awareness requires acknowledging that the reality of racism still exists today. It did not end with the civil rights movement, or with affirmative action, or with the election of a token Black president. We need to be honest about that. It requires that we recognize the systematic nature of the inbuilt prejudice and unfairness of our society that favors us as a group. We must be willing to confront what this means for us and be willing to become more racially literate. We need to wake up to our whiteness and our white privilege. It's time to open our eyes and see, because all of society must change. We need to process all of our emotions around racism, fear, embarrassment, ignorance, discomfort, guilt, shame, even defensiveness. And we need to have really difficult conversations as a faith community and as families and individuals. And the second, racial literacy, is about educating ourselves about our country's history, but also our own history of our relationships with other races. We must see how history has been whitewashed. We must learn about the experiences of other races, the harsh day-to-day realities. There is much that is still not recognized about the systematic race system that affects housing, education, employment, policing, healthcare, and voter suppression. And thirdly, we need to acknowledge what is ours to do. We must take action, and we have work to do, and it is primarily white people's work. The oppressed are not going to be able to free themselves without the help of the oppressor and the oppressive systems. By the end of the service, I hope that you will realize the need to take action, primarily in our own hearts and minds, taking ownership to be part of the solution. I have a special presentation that I'm going to be making instead of a regular talk, and it will walk us through our blind spots. So I ask that we pray for the openness of heart to be courageous and not miss this moment. This past week, Unity Worldwide Ministries sent us out a prayer that they have asked us to use. Okay, a little issue with my screen here. Oh, there we go. So I invite us all to pray this prayer from our hearts. We call upon God's love in this moment, important moment, knowing that the divine love is the greatest power in the universe. We pray for the wounded heart of humanity as we grieve, cry, hurt, and despair over injustice and inequity. May divine love enfold and comfort everyone who is hurting. May divine wisdom guide each person and institution in taking inspired action to ensure that all are celebrated for their inherent goodness as a part of God's creation. May we remain resolute in walking the course of human rights and social justice for all. We pray in the spirit of unity, love, and oneness. Amen. And we continue to pray for all those who have been asking for our prayers. We pray for Karen Lyons, Leslie's niece, who is on hospice. We pray for the comfort of the divine presence to be with her in this time of transformation, and for all of her family and all those who love her. Continue to pray for Pat Kobler, who is recovering well from her aneurysm. We pray for continued health and well-being for Sean, overcoming cancer. We pray for Andy and Karen Oman. And additionally, we pray for Barbara Posnick-Coover, for Nancy Crowell, that's Elaine Jemmy's daughter, who had a stroke this past week. We pray for Barbara McCarthy, congregant down in Marysville, having some health issues, and pray for a former congregant, Joe Ann Cup, in Arizona, in Tucson. So we pause to add all those in our own hearts as well. And as we hold all of them in prayer, we hold the thought of a mighty peace. There is this presence, there is this power within us that is called peace. It is the Holy Spirit in form. And in his book, Jesus Christ Heals, Fillmore wrote, "This consciousness is the healing itself." And so we remember that this morning, that it is being in touch with this power of peace that is the healing that we all require. And in keeping with that theme of peace, I'm going to read not today's daily word, but tomorrow's. And tomorrow's daily word says, world peace. I do my part to bring peace to the world. The way I live my life tells a lot about my character. Do my words express peace and love? Do my actions convey kindness and consideration? There is love in my heart for all humankind. I share this love freely, regardless of appearances or what is happening in the news or in my surroundings. Choosing to see and live from the truth, I am always compassionate and peaceful in my dealings with others. It is so important to keep my thoughts and actions spiritually based, taking time to feed my soul so I'm able to stay rooted in my belief that peace for all is possible. In this way, I am doing my part to bring about world peace. I feel blessed to be part of this process. Hold the thought of a mighty peace. This consciousness is the healing itself. And so, once again, we have a time of meditation. Again, this week provided for us by Christy Stevens.
Good morning, dear Unity in the Gold Country, and any visitors near or far. Happy to see you this morning. Well, we're sequestered in our homes, but we are here together in our hearts, as one in our hearts. And that feels good. Feels good to be here with you. You know, we all receive divine messages at times, and mine often come as a song. I hear it playing. So the song that came last week was the Beatles song, Let It Be. You remember the words? When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. So in that spirit of letting everything be exactly as it is, let's allow tension and worries to leave the body, the mind. Let's do this together, this cleansing and clearing. And we'll use a Japanese spiritual method of dry bathing called Kenyoku-ho. If you'll just join with me, briefly, we're going to be placing hands to shoulders, sweeping across the body to the hip. We're going to be doing that 3 times. Breathing in, breathing out with the sweep. So right hand to left shoulder, breath in, and as we breathe out, slowly sweep across the body, releasing any contraction in the lungs, any sadness in the heart, any toxins in the liver, and out. Left hand to right shoulder. Breathe in, sweep across the body, releasing any tension in the chest, shoulders drop. Any grief in the heart, any irritation or anger in the spleen, and out. Again, right hand to left shoulder, breathe in. And as we breathe out, sweep across the body, allowing any tensions, worries, contractions to just release and let go and out. And we'll do the same thing with our arms. Breathe in, right hand to left shoulder. And as we breathe out and slowly move down our arms, feel our energy just moving out any cares that we have in the body and out the tips of our fingers and out. Then left hand to right shoulder. Feel the energy just moving out any cares, any heaviness in our body, and out our hands and the tips of our fingers. And again, right hand to left shoulder, just moving down the arm, knowing that we are releasing any cares and worries up to the arms of Divine Mother, who is willing to carry this for us, so that we come fully here in this now moment. Our feet on the floor, shoulders relaxed, belly released, fully present in this now moment. I can place hands on heart, and if you're comfortable, close your eyes. Bring to mind a beloved person, pet, or place in nature where you find joy and comfort. Feel how this love and contentment expands your heart. Allow this love to radiate out like a fountain of light to every cell of your body, every fiber of your being, moving like sparkles of light everywhere. So the whole body is alight with vitality and love. Allow this light and love to continue beyond your body, out into the world, touching all beings, animals, plants, humans, the air, water, and mineral peoples. Allow this vibrant field to continue to fill the earth and the sky, touching the heavens with your light and your love. Hold this vision steady as we affirm, I am pure radiance. We are pure radiance. As we affirm this truth within, we create a greater possibility of health for all, vibrant health for all, and peace and harmony in the world. And so it is. Amen.
Thank you so much, Christy, as always, for that beautiful, beautiful, energetic meditation. We now have a beautiful piece of music from one of my favorite New Thought singers, Jan Garrett, and it's called Love Wins.
You might win a battle, you could win a race, you could outrun your rivals, come in first place, you could lose your center in the push and the shove, or simply surrender and tune into love. Love's not a contest, it's just who we are. Both the light and the shadow are at home in the heart. Beyond the struggle, there's music to play and songs to be singing at the end of the day. Love wins, love wins. All is well in the end. Love wins. Love knows no boundaries. It's the light in our eyes, familiar to all, universally prized. There's a world of compassion, and we're good to be in. We could just quit fighting, let love win. 'Cause love wins.
harmony there from Jen Garrett and J.D. Martin. Love wins. Beautiful, beautiful thought. So it's not really a talk that I'm giving, but what we're really talking about today is conversing with the universe, the small self and big self. And I put this up because I think it speaks a powerful message to us. It's an obligation of the privileged to bear witness to injustice. If our brothers and sisters of color have to live it, we have the moral obligation to not turn away or remain silent. We affirm that truth as a spiritual community and individually. So today I'm going to invite us to listen to Dr. Robin DiAngelo speaking on deconstructing white privilege. And if you have any shred of resistance in your body to listen to this, I encourage you to please just let that go and listen with an open heart.
I'm Dr. Robin DiAngelo, and my work focuses on the question of what does it mean to be white in a society that proclaims race meaningless, yet is profoundly separated by race. And to start this off, I want to draw your attention to the fact that I'm white. So just look at me for a moment, think about it, notice it. And part of being white is that it's a very uncomfortable thing for me to do. And it's taken me many, many years to be able to draw people's attention to my race and see any significance in it. And that's because as a white person, I was socialized to see race as what they had. I was just a person. I was just a white bread, a Heinz 57. I didn't have race. I was socialized to see race as individual acts of discrimination and prejudice, individual acts that anybody could do to anybody else, and if you did those acts, you were a bad person. And that is why, since I saw myself as a good person, I didn't see myself as connected to racism, and certainly didn't see myself as connected to race. In other words, I didn't have a sense of a racial identity. Today I understand that I move through the world always and most particularly as a white person. I have a white frame of reference and I have a white experience. And part of being white is to have that be invisible to us and to be able to live our lives without ever acknowledging that, to see that as non-operative. I now understand racism as a system, as a deeply embedded system, a system that our country was founded on and that all our institutions were created out of. And every institution reinforces this system. And it's a system of unequal power. So let me give you an example. Women in the United States got the right to vote in 1920. And there was only one possible way that we could have gotten the right to vote, and that was for men to give it to us, because we literally were not sitting in the seats of institutional power. We could not give ourselves the right to vote. That doesn't mean that we couldn't have personal power, but we didn't have institutional power. And that's the difference between a system and individual acts. Prior to women's suffrage, I could certainly discriminate against men. I could be unfair to individual men, but my group could not systematically deny men as a group the right to vote. And men controlled all the institutions, and they all worked together to convey the message that women's place was here and men's place was there. And that's the difference between individual prejudice and a system of inequality. So in this field, we think about oppression, or in this case racism, as group prejudice backed by institutional power. And so prior to the civil rights movement, it was fairly socially acceptable for white people to just come out and say, we are superior. My father certainly was comfortable saying that. The great joke of Archie Bunker and all of the family was that he wasn't up with the times and he was still saying things that conveyed this idea. But post-civil rights, it became bad to be racist, right? It became unacceptable to be racist. And that seems like a positive thing, right? Racism's bad. But unfortunately, what it morphed into is to make it impossible for white people to look at racism, because what we hear is, I would have to be a bad person in order to perpetuate racism. It became a moral issue. In addition to years of reflection and study of my own racial identity and how it shapes my life and my experience and my perspectives, I've had the very rare opportunity to, for a living, day in and day out, lead primarily white groups of people in discussions of race and racism. And there are some very, very predictable patterns that come up in these conversations. And as I listen to these, it's almost like a script, right? That, like, it's almost as if, as white folks, we just pick up this script and we say the same things again and again and again. And as a sociologist, rather than seeing something that's patterned as meaning therefore it's true, I look at something patterned as very revealing of how we get socialized to see things and to see the world. And then the next question that follows that is, and so how does that function? Right? And when we look around us, we can see that although we have changes since the civil rights movement and we have this idea of racism being bad, we still have the same unequal outcomes by race. By every measure, we have racial inequality. So how do we have such different narratives than we had prior to the civil rights movement and still have unequal outcomes? And as I listen to white folks, my group, repeat these narratives over and over, I got this image of a dock, like a pier, and it's just floating on the water, and that's all the superficial things that we say. And you probably recognize some of these, you hear them, maybe you've said them yourself. I don't see color, I was taught to treat everybody the same, I don't care if you're pink, blue, purple, polka dotted, my parents weren't racist, that's why I'm not racist, or my parents were racist, that's why I'm not racist. It doesn't really matter what goes in front of it. The answer is always, I'm not racist. I know people of color. I used to work in the military. All of the things we say to rationalize that we ourselves are not complicit in this system. Now, I want to speak to two of these before I kind of take us below the surface of the dock. And one is this idea that our parents taught us to treat everyone the same. And I am just going to put it out there like this. No, they didn't. That is not humanly possible. Human beings are not objective. You cannot be taught to treat or to see everyone the same. And when you say that, you're indicating that you don't understand how socialization works, which is actually a positive thing in the sense that that can direct what you would need to focus on if you want to get deeper understanding. The other one I want to speak to is this common trope of, I don't care if you're pink, purple, polka dotted. If that's in your vocabulary, I would urge you to please drop it and never say it again. Although it isn't intentional, it's actually very demeaning. People don't come in those colors, and what it conveys is that you're not prepared to engage with authenticity. Okay? And that's why I have this image of a dock, right? That's very superficial surface. And for me, in trying to understand how all this works, what it means to be white, and live so separate by race, even though I was taught to see myself individually as open-minded and outside of all of this, I've had to go under the surface. And that's why I have this image here now of under the water. You see the pier, the pillars or posts that prop up the surface, okay? So, for example, it's very common in discussions of race to have white people tell you about all the people of color in their lives, right? Oh, I have these coworkers, or my best friend, or my second cousin married a black man, or all of the ways that we want everyone to know that we have relationships with people of color, okay? And so we're giving you evidence. Right? When someone tells you that, they're giving you evidence. And so what are they giving you evidence of? They're giving you evidence that because they love people of color, know and love people of color, they can't be racist, which means they see racism as conscious dislike or explicit bias or hatred. Right? And they're communicating to you that they don't have conscious dislike or hatred, as evidenced by all of these people in their lives. And what we don't understand is the power of implicit bias. Most bias is unconscious. And that makes it very, very dangerous because it drives our behaviors, but we're not aware of it. Yes, it's wonderful to have people of color in your life if you're white. Many, many, many people, white people, don't have people of color in close relationships. But that doesn't mean your life is free of racism. That doesn't mean you don't have a white experience or a white perspective. And it also doesn't mean that racism will not surface in your relationships with people of color. So if we go underneath and we look at the pillars that are supporting that kind of superficial ways that we're taught to think about racism, we see individualism as a very powerful prop or support, this idea that each of us is unique and outside of socialization. We see universalism, which is kind of the opposite of individualism. Individualism says, why can't we all be different? And universalism says, why can't we all be the same? This is a very popular ideology in religious or faith communities. And I'm not arguing that on a deep spiritual level, we're not all universally the same, but we don't live, if you will, in the spiritual realm. We live in the physical realm. And here in the physical realm, we have to ask ourselves, how does it function to say we all bleed under the skin? Well, it functions to take race off the table, to take power off the table, to deny that we have fundamentally different experiences, because racism is real. And while race isn't real, in other words, at the biological level, there is no real, true race or racial difference as we're taught to understand it, these very superficial signifiers of racial difference that allow us to categorize people, these are very real in their consequences for people's lives. And this insistence that we're all one doesn't allow us to engage with that social reality. I try to help white people see how race functions in our lives. And I try to move us away from the really obvious, evident examples, such as a racist joke or a racist action, or things that would be recognizable to everybody, right? The kinds of acts that cause people like me, well-meaning people like me, to say, I couldn't possibly be racist, I don't do those things. And I try to help white people understand racism as the very fabric of our society. And I think the most profound example of everyday racism is segregation. That most white people live in racial segregation. While we may work with people of color, when we go home, people of color are rarely at our dinner table. And I don't mean setting our table. I mean sitting and breaking bread with us, true relationships in our lives. Many people can recognize the explicit, kind of conscious dislike type of racism, racist jokes, racist expressions, the KKK. But I want to help white people see the everyday racism that's embedded and that we participate in. And I want to look at neighborhood and school segregation as an example. I'm going to start with this app here. These are the app's founders. It's a new app called The Sketch Factor. And what it does is when you go to a new city, you can put in where you are, and it tells you which neighborhoods to avoid because they're sketchy. And of course, sketchy is very much associated with race and class in the white mind. And so now we have the convenience of segregation through an app. We don't actually have to talk to other white people about, where are the good neighborhoods and the bad neighborhoods. And that good neighborhood, bad neighborhood, good schools, bad schools discourse is an example of new racism. I don't think it gets by anybody that is racially coded language. So this way we can come out and police those racial boundaries without ever kind of naming race. But we all know what we're talking about. And I think the most profound way that my life has been shaped by my race is through the power of segregation. Most white people do live in segregation. We choose that segregation, and in a lot of ways we celebrate it. What makes a school good and what makes a neighborhood good? Well, the absence of people of color. That is the way that white people measure the value of their neighborhoods and schools. And while we don't come out and name that, we all know what it is. And so I have had to think very deeply on what it means to have grown up in a primarily white neighborhood, to be born into, to go to school, to study, to learn, to play, to worship, to love, to work, and to die in segregation, and not have one single person who loved, mentored, or guided me convey that there was any loss. And I'm going to repeat that because I think it's very profound, and I really want us to sit with it. That I could live my whole life in segregation. In fact, if I followed the trajectory that my loving parents laid out for me in my good neighborhood and my good school and my good college and my good career, in which I would ideally rise to the top, I could easily never have any consistent, ongoing, authentic relationships with people of color, and not one person who guided me ever conveyed that there was loss. Just sit with that for a moment, that there is no inherent value in the perspectives or experiences of people of color. If my parents, if my schools, if my curriculum, if my teachers, if my government saw value in those perspectives, I would be given those perspectives, but I wasn't given those perspectives. And that shapes my relationships. It shapes what I care about. It shapes what I see, what I don't see, who I build my life with, and who I don't build my life with. And that is the level where we really need to look at race inside of us and with us. In the line of work that I do, it's a breakthrough if you can get white people to acknowledge that our race privileges us in this society, right? That is like the second coming, to get white folks to admit that we are privileged by our race. But even that begins to get superficial. And you'll hear white people say, just because of the color of my skin, you know, I have these things, as if this is just an accident that happens. And I want to take us deeper. I want to take us inside this skin. My psychosocial development was inculcated in the water of white supremacy. That is what I call this system. I don't mean the KKK. I mean a system in which whiteness and white people are central and seen as inherently superior to people of color. My personality was formed in that water. My worldview was formed in that water. I didn't choose it. It isn't my fault. I'm not racked with guilt about it, but I am responsible for changing it. Because the default of our society is the reproduction of racism. It's built into every system and every institution. And if we just live our lives and carry on in the most comfortable ways for us, we will necessarily reproduce it. There is no neutral space. Inaction is a form of action. One of the most effective adaptations of racism since the civil rights era is this idea of a racist is a bad person, and if you're not racist, you're a good person. What I call the good-bad binary. And we can all fill it in, right? So if you're racist, then you're prejudiced and mean-spirited and bigoted and ignorant and Southern and probably drive a pickup truck. So we got some classism in there, right? This is our racist. And if you're not racist, you're good and you're progressive and you're open-minded and you're educated and you're Northern. And this binary is probably the #1 construct that keeps racism today in place and makes it nearly impossible to talk to white people about racism. The defensiveness we have comes from this binary. What we hear is, you just said I was a bad person. And so this binary sets it up to be mutually exclusive. You cannot be a good person and be complicit with racism. So you'll notice in the news when racism gets talked about, they'll bring in the evidence they'll have to defend the person that's being accused of racism is, but he's a really nice person, right? Because again, it's mutually exclusive. We have to understand racism as a system that we're all a part of. You know, I often in my trainings, after I've kind of laid out kind of how racism works, I'll ask people of color, how often have you given white people feedback on our inevitable, unaware and unintentional, but inevitable racism and have that go well for you. And you know, there's eye rolls and laughter, and basically the answer is never. Right? It's virtually impossible for people of color to give us feedback, because that binary sets us up to defend, right? I must at all costs deflect and establish that I am not racist, right? And that makes it so that we can't examine the reality of the society that we live in. Right? And then I'll follow up and ask this question. So what would your daily life be like? This is a question I ask the people of color. If you could simply give us feedback when we step in it, which we inevitably will, and have us receive that with grace, reflect, and seek to do something different, what would your daily life be like? And recently, a man of color in the room, there was a pause, and then he said, it would be revolutionary. And I just want you to sit with that for a minute. Revolutionary. That white people would receive the feedback, reflect, and try to change our behavior. That would be a revolution. And on the one hand, it speaks to how difficult we are, how powerful this binary is to keep us separate, from this system in our minds, but also how simple, and that there are material consequences, right, in heart rate and blood pressure and length of life for people of color, from the ways that would lower the kinds of stress that they have every day navigating all of this from us while we deny that anything's happening. Returning to the pillars underneath the dock, now we can label them, right? So we have individualism, we have universalism, right? Individualism, why can't we all be different? Universalism, why can't we all be the same? They both function to take race off the table. We have internalized superiority that no white person can miss. It was not lost on me that fundamentally it is better to be white. I don't want that belief. I didn't ask for that belief, and I've committed my life to challenging it, but 24/7, that is what society reinforces for me. So internalized superiority is also one of the pillars. The good-bad binary is a very foundational pillar holding up new racism. And segregation, the power of segregation to keep this system in place. And for me, by identifying those pillars, it has helped guide me to then how would I challenge each of those things. And so I urge you to take this journey. It is lifelong. It won't be over in my lifetime. I will never be free of all of the investments in this system that I have that I can't see, but I have committed my life to doing my very best to continually challenge it. And I invite you, and in fact, urge you to do the same.
Again, I just want to bring up that slide that says, it's an obligation of the privileged to bear witness to injustice. Our brothers and sisters of color have to live it. We have the moral obligation to not turn away or remain silent. And so my hope is that today is the beginning for all of us as a spiritual community to begin to address this issue. And as she said, there's no end to this. We will be doing this for the rest of our lives, each one of us. And I will talk later about what we can do and what we might do. And so we have a new power statement for June. My heart knows well, no matter the circumstances. My heart knows well-being, no matter the circumstances. So we take that thought in, and each day this month, hopefully, we will know that to be the truth of our heart. As always, I invite us to open up our minds and hearts, to take a moment to be aware of everything that we have been blessed with. We feel gratitude in our hearts for our lives, for the quality of our lives, and for all of our experiences. And together we say, I give in love because I love to give. And again, thank you for your generosity in helping us to stay solvent during these times. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip this song, but we will come back to it another time. And so, as I mentioned, we have this, we have this need to really respond and to overcome and look at racism individually and as a group. And so I want to encourage you, and I forgot to make the slide for this, so hopefully you can see if I hold this up, that on the website, we now have a new window. It's below the one of me in my green shirt, and it says, Overcoming Racism and Prejudice. There's a whole load of resources that Unity and the Unity Worldwide Ministries has made available to us. I was on a call last Sunday with ministers from across the country, and several churches have already been addressing this, one of which is the one in San Diego. And so there are all sorts of programs that are available. There are movies, there are books that you can read. There's incredible articles, TED Talks like this one that you just listened to. So you can go to unitygold.us, which is our website, and then click on the window that says Overcoming Racism and Prejudice. So that's our homework for the rest of our lives, really. Just want to mention the spiritual exploration class resumed last Tuesday morning, where we are dissecting the video Liberating Jesus with Leonard Jacobson. I understand that there were some issues. We had 2 different Zoom logins, unfortunately, one in the bulletin that was different from the actual login. So apologies to anybody who missed the first session. We only got through the first 2 little pieces. So please join us this coming Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. and our Zoom access email goes out every Monday, so look for that tomorrow, and then all of the Zoom events for the week are on there, so check that out. Also, just to bring up that we did some prayer vigils last week, hour-long prayer vigils, and I want to thank Sandy Spurgeon, Claire Paul Marino, and Marlene Bottenfield for doing one each, and I did one on Tuesday evening. There is talk of the Unity Worldwide Ministries, the headquarters, hosting something during this coming week, so we will let you know about that. There is also some talk locally of us, the Interfaith group, having a protest, and we of course invite many of our congregants as possible to be part of that. Dennis Casella, Frank Castro-Weir and I were part of the protest Friday in Sutton and Brunswick, wearing face masks and social distancing. So that would be the way that we would do it if we're going to get this organized. So again, we'll let you know what comes up. If you have anybody who's passed away or does so in time ahead, please send us a photograph so that they can be added to the wall of remembrance, and that includes pets. And I'm going to skip also the closing song, and I'm going to finish a little differently. I'm going to have us recite our unity prayer, and then afterwards, I'm going to put up a photograph of George Floyd. And I'm going to invite us to hold silence for 9 minutes. We remember that it was for 9 minutes that the police officer had his knee on his neck. And I think it's a good thing for us to actually experience the length of time, those 9 minutes. And so we can join our minds and our hearts with George and also with the officers and pray for healing during that time. So let us recite our prayer together. The light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love of God. The power of God protects us. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever we are, God is, because I am, and all is well. And so we won't have our usual ending where we'll be waving and talking. We'll just end with silence. And then when you're finished, you can just exit the meeting yourself. Thank you all for being here this morning. Thank you all. God bless you. I love you. See you next time.